Imagine standing in a crowded Roman street. It is early morning. The city is already awake. Merchants are shouting prices. Horses move between carts. Soldiers pass through the crowd. Wealthy citizens walk beneath the shade of their robes, while ordinary people push through the narrow streets. And somewhere inside that noise, someone is trying to control you. Not with chains, not with a weapon, with a sentence. You should be ashamed. You owe me. If you really cared, you would do this. Everyone agrees with me. After everything I've done for you, you're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You need to prove yourself. The words are different. The mechanism is the same. Someone has discovered which emotion controls you, and they are pressing it. This is what makes manipulation so dangerous. A person does not always need power over you if they can control your perception. They only need to make you doubt yourself, make you angry, make you afraid, make you desperate for approval, make you feel guilty, make you feel that you must respond immediately. And once your emotions begin moving faster than your judgment, the person in front of you no longer has to force you. You begin forcing yourself. You send the message. You apologize when you did nothing wrong. You accept an unfair deal. You explain yourself for 20 minutes. You give someone another chance. You spend money you cannot afford. You abandon your boundaries. You say yes when every part of you wanted to say no. And afterward, when the emotion disappears, you wonder, why did I do that? The Stoics understood something uncomfortable about human freedom. The easiest person to control is not necessarily the weakest person. It is the person who has not learned to govern his own reactions. Epictetus was born into slavery. He knew what external power looked like. He knew what it meant for another person to possess authority over your circumstances. Yet the philosophy he developed placed enormous importance on the distinction between what happens to us and what we do with what happens. That distinction is the beginning of psychological freedom, because manipulation often enters through the space between an event and your reaction. Someone insults you. There is the event, then comes the interpretation. They don't respect me. They think I'm worthless. I need to defend myself. I need to destroy them. That interpretation creates emotion. The emotion creates urgency. And urgency creates obedience. You thought you were reacting to the other person, but you were actually reacting to the story your mind created about what the other person meant. This is why becoming difficult to manipulate does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean distrusting everyone. It does not mean becoming aggressive. It means becoming slower to surrender your judgment. Picture a fortress. A weak fortress has beautiful walls but an unlocked gate. It doesn't matter how impressive the walls look. Anyone can walk inside. Your mind can be the same. You can be intelligent, successful, confident, educated, respected, and still have an unlocked gate. Perhaps your gate is approval. Perhaps it is anger. Perhaps it is loneliness. Perhaps it is money. Perhaps it is attraction. Perhaps it is fear of rejection. Perhaps it is your need to be understood. Someone discovers the gate, and suddenly they don't have to fight you. They simply knock. The Stoics would ask a different question. Not, how do I make people stop manipulating me? But, what weakness inside me makes manipulation effective? That question changes everything. Because you cannot control another person's intentions. You cannot control whether someone lies. You cannot control whether someone guilt trips you. You cannot control whether someone misunderstands you. You cannot control whether someone tries to provoke you. But you can train the part of yourself that decides what those things mean. And once that part becomes stronger, manipulation becomes much more difficult. There is a reason some people seem almost impossible to pressure. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. They don't reveal every insecurity. They don't make major decisions while emotionally activated. They don't need everyone to approve of them. They can hear an accusation without immediately defending themselves. They can hear praise without becoming dependent upon it. They can hear rejection without collapsing. They can hear an insult without handing the speaker control of their emotional state. That is not magic. It is training. And over the next 40 minutes, we're going to build that training step by step. 10 Stoic rules, 10 psychological defenses, 10 ways of becoming harder to control without becoming harder to love. But there is one rule that comes before all the others. If you miss this one, the remaining 9 become much weaker. Because before you can control your response, you must learn to recognize the moment when someone is trying to control it. So ask yourself, who has the power to change your emotional state with a single sentence? That answer may reveal more about your freedom than you think. Manipulation rarely announces itself. A manipulator does not usually walk into your life and say, "I'm about to exploit your insecurity." It arrives disguised as something familiar. Concern, love, friendship, authority, urgency, romance, opportunity, even kindness. That is why manipulation can be difficult to recognize. Sometimes the person is deliberately manipulating you. Sometimes they are simply using unhealthy communication patterns they learned from others. And sometimes the problem is not even another person. Sometimes your own mind manipulates you. Fear tells you that disaster is coming. Ego tells you that you must win the argument. Loneliness tells you to accept treatment you would normally reject. Envy tells you that another person's success diminishes your own. Anger tells you that immediate retaliation will restore your dignity. The Stoics were not teaching people how to dominate others. They were teaching people how to stop being dominated by their own passions. This distinction matters because becoming difficult to manipulate is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It is about becoming trustworthy to yourself. When you say no, you know why. When you say yes, you know why. When you walk away, you don't need an audience. When someone criticizes you, you examine the criticism without automatically accepting it or rejecting it. When someone praises you, you appreciate it without needing more. You become internally anchored. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life surrounded by people who wanted things from him. He was emperor. That meant praise could be political. Advice could contain ambition. Friendship could be mixed with self-interest. Criticism could be dangerous. Yet his private philosophical practice repeatedly returned to the same challenge. How do I remain governed by reason when the world constantly tries to pull my attention, emotions, and judgment in different directions? That question is just as relevant today. The Roman Forum has become the smartphone screen. The political crowd has become the comment section. The ambitious courtier has become the salesperson. The gossiping neighbor has become the viral post. The person demanding immediate obedience has become the notification saying, "You need to respond now." But you don't always need to respond now. You don't need to explain every decision. You don't need to defend every opinion. You don't need to convince everyone that you are a good person. You don't need to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. And you certainly don't need to allow someone else's emotional storm to become your weather. The Stoic goal is not to eliminate emotion. That would be impossible. The goal is to create enough space between emotion and action that judgment has a chance to speak. That space is where freedom lives. Today, we're going to build that space through 10 rules. Some will feel simple. Some will challenge your ego. One will force you to examine the stories you tell yourself. Another will teach you why urgency is one of the most powerful weapons against judgment. And the final rule may be the most important of all, because it reveals the deepest form of manipulation, the kind you perform on yourself. So don't listen to these rules merely as ideas. Imagine someone testing each one against you. Imagine the difficult conversation, the insulting message, the unfair request, the sudden opportunity, the person who knows exactly how to make you feel guilty. Then ask, would the person still control me if I remained calm? That is where our journey begins. Rule 1, never give someone your first reaction. The first rule is simple. Pause before you obey your emotion. Not suppress it, not deny it. Pause. Imagine receiving a message from someone you care about. I can't believe you did that. Clearly you don't respect me. Your heart changes immediately. Your body becomes tense. Your mind begins constructing a defense. You want to respond immediately. You type. Delete. Type again. Maybe you write 3 paragraphs explaining yourself. This is where manipulation can become effective. The other person has not necessarily controlled your decision. They have controlled the speed at which you make it, and speed matters. Psychologically, intense emotion narrows attention. When people feel threatened, angry, embarrassed, or afraid, they often become more focused on the immediate problem and less capable of considering broader consequences. The Stoics understood the importance of this interval. Epictetus emphasized examining impressions rather than automatically accepting them. An impression arrives. Something happens. Your mind immediately says, "This is terrible. That person insulted me. I must respond." The Stoic practice begins by asking, "Is this interpretation actually true?" That question creates distance, and distance creates choice. Think about Marcus Aurelius. He was not living in a peaceful retreat. He governed an enormous empire during periods of war, political tension, disease, and personal loss. Yet his philosophical practice repeatedly returned to the discipline of responding rather than merely reacting. That distinction is powerful. Reaction says, "They made me angry." Response says, "They presented something that triggered anger. Now I decide what to do." The difference is not semantic. It is ownership. Now bring this into modern life. Someone comments on your appearance. Someone criticizes your work. Your partner becomes distant. Your manager sends a cold message. A friend excludes you from an event. A stranger insults you online. The first emotional impulse may be real, but real does not mean authoritative. Your anger can be real without being correct. Your fear can be real without predicting the future. Your jealousy can be real without revealing the truth. Your guilt can be real without proving you did something wrong. This is where emotional intelligence becomes a stoic weapon. You notice the emotion, name it, then delay the decision. Try a simple rule. No major response while emotionally flooded. If necessary, wait 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. For major decisions, sleep on it. During the pause, ask 3 questions. What actually happened? What story am I adding? What action would I respect tomorrow? That third question is especially powerful, because manipulation wants the version of you that exists right now. Stoic discipline protects the version of you who must live with the consequences tomorrow. Imagine your emotions as horses. You don't need to kill the horses. You need reins. Anger can provide energy. Fear can signal danger. Sadness can reveal what matters. But none of them should automatically hold the steering wheel. The person who can provoke your reaction can influence your behavior. The person who cannot rush your judgment has far less power over you. So the next time someone pushes an emotional button, don't ask, "How do I win?" Ask, "Why am I being rushed?" Then breathe. Because sometimes the most powerful response is the one you give yourself before you give anyone else an answer. And once you learn to pause, you discover something even more important. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Rule 2, stop trying to prove yourself. There is a particular kind of trap intelligent people fall into. They want to be understood, so they explain. Then they explain the explanation. Then they provide evidence. Then they tell the entire story. Then they become frustrated because the other person still doesn't understand. And eventually they realize something painful. The other person may not have misunderstood them. The other person may simply have decided not to understand. This is why the second Stoic rule is, do not make your peace dependent on being correctly perceived by everyone. The need to prove yourself is often connected to identity. You don't merely want someone to understand your argument. You want them to confirm who you believe you are. I am a good person. I am loyal. I'm intelligent. I am successful. I am not weak. When someone threatens that identity, your ego rushes forward. An ego hates uncertainty, so you begin defending your image. The ancient philosopher Socrates offers an important contrast. He became famous not for pretending to possess every answer, but for questioning assumptions. His method often exposed how little people actually knew beneath their confidence. The lesson is not that you should imitate Socrates literally. It is that intellectual humility makes you less vulnerable to psychological pressure. If you don't need to appear right, you become harder to manipulate through accusations of being wrong. Consider someone saying, "You're selfish." The insecure response is immediate. No, I'm not. Let me explain everything I've done for you. But notice what just happened. The other person placed a label on your identity. You accepted the battlefield. Now you are trying to prove that you are not the person they described. Instead, pause. Ask, what specifically did I do that you believe was selfish? Now the vague accusation must become concrete. This is a powerful communication principle. Manipulation thrives in fog. Clarity weakens it. Everyone thinks you're difficult. Who is everyone? What you did was disrespectful. Which action? If you loved me, you would... Why does love require this particular behavior? Any normal person would agree. According to whom? Notice the difference between defensive arguing and calm clarification. You are not fighting. You are requesting reality. That is Stoic strength. In modern relationships, this becomes essential. If someone continually forces you to prove your loyalty, your love, your intelligence, your commitment, or your worth, ask whether the relationship has become an endless examination. Healthy relationships can contain disagreement. They do not require permanent trials of innocence. And social media makes this even more difficult. People feel pressure to explain themselves publicly. A controversial opinion appears. Someone attacks. You feel compelled to respond. Then another person joins, then another. Suddenly, you are spending an hour defending your character to strangers who have never met you. The algorithm rewards emotional escalation. The Stoics seek something else. Peace. Not because truth doesn't matter, because attention matters. Your attention is one of the few resources you can never recover. Do not spend it proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. There is also a practical test. Before explaining yourself, ask, will this explanation improve the situation or merely relieve my anxiety? That question can save you hours. Sometimes explanation is necessary. If you made a mistake, explain. If someone needs important information, explain. If a misunderstanding genuinely matters, clarify. But when explanation becomes an attempt to force someone to approve of you, stop. Your character is not a courtroom case that requires every stranger to issue a favorable verdict. Let your actions accumulate. Let consistency speak. Let time expose what words cannot. The person who knows who they are does not need to announce it every 5 minutes. And that leads naturally to the third rule. Because once you stop proving yourself, you must learn something even harder. You must become comfortable with someone else's disappointment. Rule 3, learn to survive disappointing people. Many people are not afraid of saying no. They are afraid of what happens after they say no. The disappointed face, the silence, the accusation, the withdrawal of affection, the possibility that someone will call them selfish. So they say yes, and resent it, then say yes again, and become exhausted. Eventually, they wonder why everyone expects so much from them. The answer is uncomfortable. Because they trained people to expect unlimited access. The third Stoic rule is, you are allowed to disappoint someone in order to remain faithful to your principles. This is not permission to be cruel. It is permission to have boundaries. Musonius Rufus, one of the later Stoic teachers, placed great emphasis on practical discipline and living according to reason rather than comfort. Stoicism was never simply about thinking impressive thoughts. It was about training conduct. And conduct becomes difficult when your values collide with another person's expectations. Imagine a young person who wants to build a business. Their friends want them out every night. They say, "You've changed. You think you're better than us. You're becoming boring." The easiest path is to abandon the discipline and preserve approval. But what is happening psychologically? The person's identity is being negotiated by the group. Human beings are social creatures. We naturally care about belonging. Rejection can feel threatening because, historically, social exclusion carried serious consequences. But modern life gives us a new challenge. We can belong to groups that are incompatible with our goals. You may be trying to become disciplined while everyone around you rewards impulsiveness. You may be trying to save money while your social circle normalizes constant spending. You may be trying to recover from a destructive relationship while friends encourage you to return. You may be trying to build something meaningful while others constantly demand your attention. At some point, someone's disappointment becomes the price of your growth. Pay it. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think being Stoic means not caring what anyone thinks. That is too simplistic. Stoicism teaches you to distinguish between what is genuinely valuable and what is merely socially rewarding. A parent's disappointment may matter, a partner's feelings may matter, a friend's concern may matter, but another person's emotional reaction is not automatically a command. Someone can be disappointed without you having done something wrong. Read that again mentally. Someone can be disappointed without you having done something wrong. This principle is liberating. Suppose you decline a request politely. The other person becomes angry. Your mind immediately says, "I must have made a mistake." Not necessarily. Their anger is information. It is not a verdict. This is why boundaries should be communicated simply. "I can't do that. I won't be available. That doesn't work for me. I've decided not to participate." Notice what is missing: a 20-minute defense. The more insecure you feel about a boundary, the more explanations you tend to attach to it. But excessive explanation can invite negotiation. You give one reason, they attack the reason. You give another, they attack that one. Soon your boundary has become a debate. You don't need to win the debate. You need to communicate the decision. Of course, there are situations where compromise is wise. Stoicism is not stubbornness. The goal is not to refuse everything. The goal is to make decisions based on reason rather than fear of disapproval. So tonight, think of one area where you regularly say yes while secretly wishing you could say no. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I disappoint them? Then ask, is that consequence truly worse than betraying myself? Sometimes becoming stronger does not require confrontation. It requires tolerating the uncomfortable silence after you finally stop people-pleasing. And once you can tolerate disappointment, another weapon loses its power: guilt. Rule 4. Never let guilt make your decisions. Guilt is complicated. Healthy guilt can tell you that you violated your own values. Manipulative guilt tries to convince you that another person's dissatisfaction is proof of your wrongdoing. Those are not the same thing. Imagine someone says, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." Your stomach tightens. You remember every favor they ever gave you. Suddenly the current request feels like a debt. You say yes, but pause. Did the previous favor create a permanent obligation, or did the relationship become a ledger? This is where Stoic reasoning becomes extremely useful. The Stoics emphasized acting from virtue rather than from external pressure. Your decision should be evaluated according to what is reasonable and just, not simply according to which person is most emotionally intense. Seneca wrote extensively about relationships, anger, generosity, and human behavior. His broader philosophical outlook recognized that human beings are interconnected, but that does not mean every demand deserves compliance. Kindness without judgment can become self-destruction. Generosity without boundaries can become resentment. Compassion without wisdom can become exploitation. Modern psychology also helps explain why guilt is so powerful. Humans generally want to see themselves as good people. When someone tells you that refusing them makes you selfish, you face an identity threat. The easiest way to remove that discomfort is to comply. And that is exactly why guilt can become a lever. The key is learning to separate responsibility from discomfort. Ask, did I actually violate a value? Or am I simply uncomfortable because someone is unhappy with me? That distinction is enormous. Suppose you promise to help someone and then abandon them without explanation. Guilt may be appropriate. Repair the damage. But suppose you decline a request because you are exhausted, busy, or because it conflicts with your priorities. They become angry. You feel guilty. The guilt does not necessarily mean you did something wrong. It may simply mean you are not accustomed to having boundaries. This is especially important in families and relationships. Love can create strong emotional obligations, but love should not require you to surrender your judgment. A relationship can survive a reasonable no, A relationship that collapses whenever you establish a boundary may have been depending on your lack of boundary. Think about money. Someone repeatedly borrows from you. Every time they ask, there is a dramatic story. You feel compassion. You give. Then they ask again. Eventually, you realize you are financing a pattern rather than solving a problem. A Stoic response might be compassionate but firm. I understand your situation. I cannot provide money. No insult. No humiliation. No moral superiority. Just a boundary. You can care without complying. That sentence belongs in your mental toolbox. I can care without complying. The same principle applies to emotional drama. Someone creates a crisis and expects you to abandon your plans every time. If you refuse, they accuse you of not caring. But caring does not mean becoming permanently available. You are not responsible for preventing every uncomfortable emotion another person experiences. Your responsibility is to act reasonably and honorably. This rule also protects you from self-manipulation. Sometimes you create guilt yourself. You think, if I rest, I'm lazy. If I succeed, people will resent me. If I leave, I'm a bad person. If I prioritize myself, I'm selfish. These thoughts can become invisible chains. Question them. Where did this rule come from? Is it rational? Does it reflect your values? Or are you carrying an old expectation that no longer belongs to you? Freedom begins when you stop treating every guilty feeling as a moral command. And there is another powerful emotion that manipulators love to exploit. Not guilt, fear. Rule 5, never make important decisions from fear. Fear is a useful messenger. It is a terrible king. It can warn you about danger. But when fear takes control of judgment, almost anything can become threatening. A difficult conversation, a breakup, a career change, a financial decision, a public mistake, a person's opinion, the possibility of rejection. Manipulation often works by making the consequences feel larger and closer than they really are. Do this now or you'll lose everything. If you leave, nobody else will want you. If you don't accept this opportunity immediately, you'll regret it forever. If you disagree with me, you'll destroy the relationship. Notice the pattern. Fear creates urgency. Urgency reduces reflection. Reduced reflection increases compliance. That is why the Stoic response is not always action. Sometimes it is slowing down. Epictetus lived under circumstances in which external freedom was severely limited, yet his philosophical teachings emphasize the importance of examining judgments. This is an important Stoic insight. The mind can add suffering to an event by predicting what the event means. You receive criticism. Your mind jumps 10 steps forward. They hate me. I'll lose my job. My reputation is ruined. My future is over. The event was one sentence. Your imagination built an empire of disaster. This is catastrophizing. And once the imagined future feels real, you become easier to control. So ask, what do I know? What am I predicting? What is the actual worst-case scenario? What would I do if it happened? That final question is powerful because fear often weakens when uncertainty becomes a plan. Imagine someone threatening to end a relationship if you refuse to obey a demand. Instead of immediately surrendering, ask, if they actually leave, what happens? It may hurt deeply, but perhaps you survive. Perhaps you rebuild. Perhaps you discover that losing a relationship built on control was painful but necessary. Fear often whispers, you cannot survive without this. Stoic practice asks, is that actually true? Marcus Aurelius repeatedly confronted impermanence. People die. Fortunes change. Reputations disappear. Empires transform. Bodies age. Nothing external remains permanently under human control. This sounds dark until you understand the freedom hidden inside it. If everything external can change, then building your entire identity around preserving one external condition is fragile. Build yourself instead, your character, your judgment, your discipline, your ability to adapt, your capacity to begin again. Then loss becomes painful without becoming annihilating. In business, this principle is crucial. Fear of missing out can make you buy. Fear of losing status can make you overspend. Fear of competition can make you copy. Fear of rejection can prevent you from asking. Fear of failure can keep you permanently preparing instead of acting. The modern world is exceptionally good at manufacturing urgency. Limited time offers, breaking news, notifications, social comparison, constant updates. Everyone seems to be running. The Stoic asks, where am I actually going? Because speed without direction is not progress. It is movement. Create a personal rule. Never make a major decision solely because someone is pressuring you to decide immediately. Take time. Gather information. Sleep. Write the decision down. Ask what you would choose if nobody could see the choice. That last question is especially revealing. Would you still buy it? Would you still stay? Would you still accept? Would you still argue? Would you still pursue it? If the audience disappeared, sometimes fear controls us because we are afraid of being seen making the wrong choice. But your life is not a performance. And once you stop making decisions for the audience, you become much harder to manipulate. Still, fear is not the only emotion that opens the gate. There is another one that can make intelligent people behave irrationally. Anger. Rule 6. Never fight on someone else's playground. Anger feels powerful. That is precisely why it is dangerous. When someone provokes you, part of you may feel that responding aggressively restores dignity. But often, the person provoking you doesn't need to defeat you. They only need you to abandon your judgment. Think of a skilled fighter trying to make an opponent lose balance. They don't necessarily attack where the opponent is strongest. They provoke movement. They create impatience. They make the opponent overextend. Anger does something similar to the mind. It narrows attention. It makes the insult feel more important than the consequence. It convinces you that immediate retaliation is necessary. Cato the Younger became known in Roman political life for his stubborn commitment to principles, particularly his resistance to what he saw as corruption and the concentration of power. Whatever one thinks of his political choices, his life illustrates a recurring Stoic challenge. How do you maintain principles when emotions and political pressures are intense? The answer is not passivity. Stoicism does not mean allowing wrongdoing to continue. It means separating action from emotional intoxication. You can confront someone without hating them. You can disagree without becoming possessed by disagreement. You can enforce a boundary without turning the conversation into revenge. This distinction is crucial today. Someone insults you online. You can respond, but ask, what outcome do I want? If the answer is, I want them to suffer, you may already be inside their game. If the answer is, I need to communicate a fact, that's different. If the answer is, I need to protect myself, that's different. If the answer is, I want strangers to know I won, you may be fighting for an audience rather than a principle. The internet is filled with emotional traps because outrage attracts attention. The person who can make you furious can keep you watching. The person who can make you defensive can keep you typing. The person who can make you feel superior can keep you returning. Your attention becomes their reward. Stoic discipline says, you decide where your attention goes. There is a practical technique here. When someone provokes you, lower your speed. Speak more slowly. Use fewer words. Ask questions. Do not mirror their emotional intensity. If they become louder, you do not have to become louder. If they insult you, you do not have to insult them. If they demand an immediate answer, you can say, I'll think about it. That sentence is underrated. It interrupts the emotional rhythm. You do not have to enter every battle simply because someone opened the battlefield. And there is a deeper reason. When anger controls you, the other person's behavior becomes the architect of your actions. They decide what you say, when you speak, how you behave, what you think about for the next 3 hours. That means they have acquired influence without needing authority. The Stoic goal is not to become impossible to offend. That would be unrealistic. The goal is to become difficult to command through offense. Someone can insult you. They cannot dictate your response. Someone can provoke you. They cannot choose your next action. Someone can disrespect you. They cannot determine your character. This is what emotional sovereignty looks like. And once you stop giving people control through anger, you are ready for one of the most subtle forms of manipulation: your need for approval. Rule 7. Stop using other people's opinions as your mirror. Imagine waking up and handing your self-worth to 10 strangers, then checking your phone every hour to see what they decided about you. Sounds absurd. Yet social media has made this behavior ordinary. A photograph receives attention. You feel valuable. A post receives criticism. You feel ashamed. Someone ignores your message. You feel rejected. A colleague receives praise. You feel inferior. Your emotional state rises and falls according to external judgment. The Stoics would recognize the danger immediately. They understood that reputation is external, and anything external can change beyond your control. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most famous people in the ancient world, yet he repeatedly reflected on how temporary fame is. The applause of thousands does not make a person virtuous. Silence does not make them worthless. That principle is incredibly relevant today. The modern version of fame is not necessarily celebrity. It is visibility, views, likes, followers, comments, professional recognition, social invitations, dating attention. All of these can become psychological currencies. The problem begins when you spend your internal peace to acquire them. Suppose you post something you are proud of. It performs badly. Your mind says, maybe I'm not good enough. But performance is not identity. An algorithm does not measure your worth. A stranger's comment does not define your character. A rejection does not prove that you are undesirable. A promotion does not prove that you are superior. External outcomes can contain useful information. They are not final judgments about your value. This is where identity becomes important. If your identity is, I am someone who must be admired, then criticism becomes existential. If your identity is, I am someone who tries to act with integrity, then criticism becomes information. You can examine it. Perhaps the critic is right. Perhaps they are wrong. Either way, your foundation remains. This is why the Stoics place such importance on virtue. Character gives you an internal standard. Without an internal standard, you need the crowd to tell you who you are. And crowds are unstable. Today they praise you. Tomorrow they forget you. One person admires your confidence. Another calls it arrogance. One person thinks your discipline is inspiring. Another thinks you're obsessed. One person loves your ambition. Another thinks you're selfish. If you attempt to satisfy all interpretations, you will become fragmented. So create your own standard. Ask, was I honest? Was I disciplined? Was I fair? Did I act courageously? Did I control what was mine to control? These questions are harder than checking likes, but they are infinitely more useful. There is another practical rule. Don't announce every goal. Sometimes public declarations create the illusion of progress. You tell everyone what you're going to become. They congratulate you. You receive a small emotional reward. Then the work becomes less urgent. Instead, build quietly. Let your habits become visible before your ambitions do. This does not mean hiding everything. It means reducing your dependence on applause. And here's the paradox. The less you need validation, the more confident you often appear. Not because you're pretending not to care, because you're no longer negotiating your identity with every person you meet. That is powerful. But even if you master approval, another trap remains. Comparison. Rule 8. Never let comparison choose your direction. There is an ancient human temptation to measure your life against someone else's. The wealthy man looks at the richer man. The successful person looks at someone more successful. The attractive person sees someone more attractive. The disciplined person sees someone more disciplined. And suddenly, an achievement that once made you proud becomes insufficient. Comparison can transform abundance into poverty without changing anything externally. You still have what you had. Your mind simply changed the reference point. This is where Stoic thinking becomes incredibly practical. The Stoics repeatedly redirected attention toward one's own duties, judgments, and conduct. You cannot live another person's life. So why use their timeline as your measurement? Diogenes provides one of the most striking examples from ancient philosophy. He deliberately rejected conventional measures of status and material success. His lifestyle was extreme, and there is no need to imitate it literally. But his challenge to conventional status was radical. He questioned the assumption that social prestige automatically equals human excellence. That challenge remains valuable because modern society constantly tells you what success should look like. More money, more followers, more possessions, more attention, more status, more attractiveness, more productivity. But more is not automatically better. The question is, more of what? More money can be useful. More money can also create more anxiety. More recognition can create opportunity. More recognition can also create dependency. More productivity can create achievement. More productivity can also become an excuse never to rest. The problem is not ambition. The problem is allowing comparison to define the destination. Suppose you are building a business. You see another creator growing faster. Instead of learning from them, you become obsessed. You check their numbers. You compare views. You feel behind. You change your strategy every week. Eventually, your own direction disappears. You are no longer building. You are reacting. This is exactly how comparison becomes a form of manipulation. Nobody needs to tell you what to do. You see someone else's life and start controlling yourself. The same happens in relationships. You see another couple online. Perfect photographs, perfect vacations, perfect smiles. You compare your ordinary Tuesday to their carefully selected highlight. Then you decide your relationship is failing, but you are comparing reality with presentation. Psychologically, this is a distorted reference point. You see the visible outcome and not the hidden cost. You see the victory but not the years. You see the house but not the debt. You see the body but not the routine. You see the relationship photo, but not the arguments. You see the success, but not the sacrifices. Stoic wisdom asks you to return to your own path. Measure yourself against yourself. Are you more disciplined than 6 months ago? Do you recover faster from setbacks? Do you speak more carefully? Do you control your spending better? Do you think more clearly? Do you keep more promises to yourself? Those are meaningful victories. Create a personal scoreboard. Not, am I ahead of them? But, am I becoming better than I was? That question returns power to you, and it protects you from the marketplace of comparison. Because once you stop competing with imaginary opponents, you have more energy to build. Yet there is still another doorway through which manipulation enters: your attention. Rule 9, guard your attention like your life depends on it. Because it does. Your life is not merely the collection of years you possess. It is the collection of moments you actually experience. And wherever your attention goes, your life follows. The ancient Stoics understood the importance of directing the mind. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to the discipline of bringing attention back to the present task. This sounds simple. It is not. Modern technology has created an environment in which thousands of people compete for your attention every day. News organizations, advertisers, influencers, apps, businesses, politicians, friends, strangers. Everyone wants a piece of your mind, and manipulation becomes easier when your attention is fragmented. A distracted person is easier to influence because they rarely stop long enough to examine what they are consuming. Think about the notification, a small vibration. You reach for the phone. You open a message, then a video, then a headline, then a comment. 20 minutes disappear. But the deeper problem is not the 20 minutes. It is that someone else successfully redirected your attention without asking you whether you wanted to give it. Now imagine doing this for years. Your attention becomes scattered. Your thoughts become reactive. Your emotional state becomes externally programmed. You wake up and immediately consume other people's priorities. Before you have decided what matters today, thousands of strangers have already decided what you should think about. This is why attention is a Stoic issue. The question is not merely, what am I looking at? It is, who is deciding what deserves my attention? You do not need to delete every app. You do not need to disappear into a mountain. You need intentionality. Create periods during the day when nobody gets access to your attention. No notifications, no endless scrolling, no unnecessary arguments, no compulsive checking. Use those moments for thinking, reading, walking, training, working, writing, being with people you love. Silence is not empty. Silence gives the mind enough room to hear itself. And this becomes especially important when someone is trying to manipulate you. They may send multiple messages, call repeatedly, demand immediate answers, create emotional urgency, flood you with information. Do not confuse volume with truth. A person can send 20 messages and still have no valid argument. You are allowed to step away. You are allowed to say, "I'll respond when I have time to think." You are allowed to end a conversation. You are allowed to leave a group chat. You are allowed to stop consuming content that consistently damages your peace. This is not weakness. It is attention management, and there is a deeper principle here. Your attention is finite. Every hour spent obsessing over someone is an hour not invested in your own life. Every evening spent arguing online is an evening not spent building something. Every morning spent comparing yourself to strangers is a morning stolen from your own priorities. The Stoic does not ask merely, "Can I handle this?" He asks, "Is this worthy of my attention?" That question can transform your life, because not everything deserves a reaction. Not every opinion deserves research. Not every insult deserves an answer. Not every opportunity deserves pursuit. Not every person deserves unlimited access. And once you learn to protect your attention, you reach the final rule, the deepest one, because sometimes the person manipulating you is you. Rule 10, master the stories you tell yourself. The most dangerous manipulator in your life may not be another person. It may be the voice inside your own head. Think about how quickly the mind creates stories. Someone doesn't text back. They're angry with me. A business opportunity fails. I always fail. Someone rejects you. I'm not attractive enough. You make a mistake. I'm a failure. You experience success. Now I have to prove I deserve it. The event is small. The interpretation becomes enormous. This is where Stoicism becomes a psychological discipline. Epictetus focused heavily on impressions and judgments. An event appears. The mind interprets it. The interpretation affects emotion. The emotion influences action. The action produces consequences. Therefore, if you want to change behavior, sometimes you must examine the judgment in the middle. Consider a simple example. Someone laughs when you speak. Your mind says, "They are laughing at me." Anger appears. You confront them. Later you discover they were laughing at something completely unrelated. The original event was real. Your interpretation was wrong. This happens constantly. We live inside interpretations, and manipulators understand this. They may tell you, "Everyone is against you. You can't trust anyone except me. You'll never find someone better. You're lucky I'm here. Nobody else understands you." Notice how these statements attempt to control your interpretation of reality. They create a closed psychological system. The manipulator becomes the source of truth. This is why intellectual independence matters. Do not outsource your interpretation of reality. Check evidence. Seek another perspective. Slow down. Ask what you actually know. And apply the same discipline to yourself. Suppose you fail. Instead of, "I am a failure," say, "This attempt failed." That tiny linguistic shift matters. One describes identity. The other describes an event. Identity statements are powerful because the brain tends to protect consistency. If you tell yourself, "I am lazy," then laziness becomes part of the identity you defend. If you tell yourself, "I have developed lazy habits," then habits can change. You are no longer imprisoned by a label. The Stoics emphasized character, but character was not an excuse for fatalism. You are always practicing something. Every action is training. Every reaction strengthens a tendency. Every time you pause instead of exploding, you strengthen restraint. Every time you tell the truth when lying would be easier, you strengthen courage. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen discipline. Every time you refuse to chase approval, you strengthen independence. You become what you repeatedly practice. This is why becoming hard to manipulate is not a single decision. It is an identity built through thousands of small decisions. And here is the deepest shift. Stop asking, how do I prevent people from controlling me? Start asking, what kind of person am I becoming? Because if you become someone who can tolerate discomfort, manipulation becomes harder. If you become someone who can tolerate rejection, manipulation becomes harder. If you become someone who can sit with uncertainty, manipulation becomes harder. If you become someone who does not need constant approval, manipulation becomes harder. If you become someone who can walk away from money, status, attention, or relationships that violate your principles, manipulation becomes much harder. The fortress becomes strong not because you built taller walls, because you stop leaving the gate unlocked. So take one final look at the 10 rules. Pause before reacting. Stop proving yourself. Survive disappointing people. Do not let guilt make decisions. Do not make major choices from fear. Refuse to fight on someone else's emotional battlefield. Stop using other people's opinions as your mirror. Stop letting comparison choose your direction. Guard your attention. Master the stories you tell yourself. These are not tricks. They are disciplines. And together, they create something more valuable than being impossible to manipulate. They create self-command. Now imagine that tomorrow morning someone tries to manipulate you. Maybe it happens at work, maybe at home, maybe through your phone, maybe in a relationship, maybe through money, maybe through criticism. The situation begins normally. Then the pressure arrives. You feel your chest tighten. Your mind wants to react. But this time, something is different. You pause. You notice the emotion. You don't immediately obey it. The other person pushes harder. You don't rush. They question your character. You don't start performing for approval. They become disappointed. You allow them to be disappointed. They use guilt. You examine whether you actually did something wrong. They create fear. You separate facts from predictions. They provoke anger. You refuse to fight on their terms. They compare you with someone else. You return to your own path. They demand your attention. You decide whether they deserve it. Then your own mind begins creating catastrophic stories. And you notice those too. That is freedom, not the absence of pressure. The ability to remain yourself while pressure exists. This is what the Stoics were trying to cultivate. Not people who feel nothing. People who are not ruled by every feeling. Not people who avoid conflict. People who can enter conflict without losing themselves. Not people who never care what others think. People who know which opinions deserve weight. Not people who never experience fear. People who refuse to make fear their master. The goal is not to become a stone. It is to become a person whose inner direction does not change every time the weather changes. One day you will realize something. The most powerful person in your life is not necessarily the loudest. Not the person with the most money. Not the person with the most followers. Not the person with the highest position. The most powerful person is the one who can govern himself. Imagine two people facing the same insult. One explodes, the other pauses. Same insult. Different internal world. Two people receive rejection. One begs for another chance. The other feels the pain, accepts reality, and continues walking. Same rejection. Different internal world. Two people face criticism. One becomes defensive. The other asks whether there is something useful inside it. Same criticism, different internal world. Two people receive praise. One becomes addicted to it. The other appreciates it and continues working. Same praise, different internal world. The difference is not that one person experiences emotion and the other doesn't. The difference is who is in command. That is the real meaning of becoming hard to manipulate. You don't become invulnerable. You become harder to steer without your consent, and that is a much more realistic kind of strength. There will always be people who attempt to pressure you, some consciously, some unconsciously, some through anger, some through affection, some through guilt, some through silence, some through praise, some through fear, and sometimes you will still fall for it. You will react too quickly. You will explain too much. You will seek approval. You will make a decision from fear. Do not turn that mistake into another form of manipulation against yourself. Learn. Correct. Return. The Stoics did not demand perfection. They demanded practice. Tomorrow gives you another opportunity. The next conversation gives you another opportunity. The next difficult message gives you another opportunity. Every emotional trigger becomes a training ground. Someone insults you? Practice the pause. Someone pressures you? Practice patience. Someone disappoints you? Practice acceptance. Someone criticizes you? Practice examination. Someone praises you? Practice humility. Someone rejects you? Practice resilience. Someone tries to control you? Practice self-command. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You begin to trust yourself, not because you know exactly what will happen, but because you know you can meet what happens. That is confidence. Real confidence is not the belief that nothing will hurt you. It is the belief that pain will not automatically control you. Real strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is knowing that vulnerability does not require surrender. Real independence is not needing nobody. It is refusing to abandon yourself merely because someone else wants something from you. And perhaps this is the final lesson the ancient Stoics leave us. Your freedom begins inside the moment between stimulus and response. Someone can knock on the door. You decide whether it opens. Someone can speak. You decide whether their words become your beliefs. Someone can become angry. You decide whether their anger becomes yours. Someone can reject you. You decide whether rejection becomes an identity. Someone can misunderstand you. You decide whether you will spend your life trying to correct every misunderstanding. Someone can offer you praise. You decide whether you become dependent upon it. Someone can threaten to leave. You decide whether fear will make your principles negotiable. That is the fortress. Not stone, not walls. Judgment, character, discipline, awareness. And the strongest fortress is not the one that keeps everyone outside. It is the one whose gate opens only by choice. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself 5 questions. Who can change my emotional state with a sentence? Where do I explain myself more than necessary? Where am I saying yes because I fear disappointing someone? What opinion am I allowing to define my worth? And what decision in my life is currently being driven by fear rather than reason? Do not rush the answers. Sit with them, because sometimes the most important philosophical work is not learning another idea. It is finally seeing the chain that has been around you for years, and then realizing something extraordinary. The chain was never locked. You simply believed you had to wear it. You don't. You can pause. You can question. You can walk away. You can say no. You can change your mind. You can remain silent. You can choose your attention. You can accept that someone will misunderstand you. You can let someone be disappointed. You can feel fear without obeying it. You can feel anger without becoming it. You can feel loneliness without returning to what harmed you. You can lose something external without losing yourself. And when you can do that, manipulation loses its greatest weapon, your automatic reaction. So remember the 10 rules. Pause before you react. Stop proving yourself. Learn to survive disappointment. Never let guilt make your decisions. Never make important choices from fear. Don't fight on someone else's emotional battlefield. Stop using other people's opinions as your mirror. Never let comparison choose your direction. Guard your attention. Master the stories you tell yourself. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to become suspicious. You do not need to dominate anyone. You only need to become responsible for the one person you can actually govern, yourself. And perhaps that is the greatest form of Stoic power. Not controlling the world, not controlling other people, not making everyone respect you, not forcing everyone to understand you, but standing quietly in the middle of a world that constantly demands your reaction, and choosing your own. And when the next person tries to pull you into their storm, remember, you don't have to become the weather just because someone else is raining. If this video gave you something useful, take one lesson and practice it today, rather than simply listening to all 10. If you want more Stoic philosophy, psychological strength, self-discipline, emotional control, and ancient wisdom applied to modern life, subscribe to the channel.